Let's now dig deeper into the fuel subsidy matter, and joining us to discuss this is an energy expert, Dr. Emeka Akabogu. Welcome to the news at 10 tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
So now we know it's obvious there will not be a removal of fuel subsidy by June. Did that come as a surprise to you?
Well, I'd say it came as a surprise, really, because I mean, while I understand the concerns of the Senate presidents, of the officials who have made this pronouncement, the pronouncement would indeed amount to these same officials becoming traducers of the law, if I may put it that way, because the withdrawal of the intended removal of subsidy flies in the face of the Petroleum Industry Act. It amounts to turning the law on its head, and I'd say indeed that they don't have the powers to do that under the law as it is.
So where exactly does that leave the Petroleum Industry Act as it stands? Okay,
let's just break it down. There are two issues which are implicated in this circumstance. So one is deregulation of the petroleum industry, deregulation of the pricing of petroleum products, and the other is the concept of subsidy as a whole and its place within the regime of the Petroleum Industry Act. So with regard to deregulation, I mean, the very fact that the Act expressly provides for deregulation of the pricing of petroleum products means that you can't have prices being fixed by the government. The Act is actually very, very specific in its conditions, and it says that wholesale and retail prices of petroleum products shall be based on unrestricted free market pricing conditions. It's a mandatory provision in the Act. So you can't have prices of petroleum products being fixed. And when they are fixed, such fixtures are illegal. So we have to have that in mind. Then the second issue is the issue of subsidies in itself. Now, subsidies within the context of the Act really shouldn't stay anything beyond February, because the Act is quite clear too on that provision. NNPC, as it is now a limited company, which means it must be commercially operated. In fact, that's the language of the Act. NNPC must be commercially run. And when it is not commercially run, that will be a breach by both its board and its management. So within that context, if you're providing for subsidies, NNPC certainly can provide for subsidies. Okay? The Act provides a window of 6 months from the commencement of the Act for the federal government to request NNPC to serve as a supplier of last resort, which means that the NNPC may deploy any means at its disposal to supply petroleum products and ensure petroleum products are in the market, probably at a cost or at a price which the government is comfortable with, but the government must bear those costs. And this can't last beyond 6 months, which is February 2022.
But the defense of the government is high inflation costs, the economic realities. Is that not good enough?
It's an absolutely understandable defense. However, it flies in the face of the law. That's the point. So it's either you want to implement the law, or you are breaking the law, or you actually call for this law to be suspended, you withdraw the law, you repeal it, amend it. But in the circumstances, you can't be approbating and reprobating, which is what the government is doing in this particular circumstance.
So do you think that Nigeria can really, is there like a lasting solution to this debacle, fuel subsidy?
Certainly. I mean, the truth is, the Nigerian economy and the value of the Nigerian naira today is very low. And the high cost of fuel relative to the purchasing power of Nigerians is a function of the value of the naira. That's the reality. But despite that, the cost of the fuel which we have in Nigeria remains among the lowest which you have within the region. So the only panacea to this is local refining of petroleum products. But even if you're refining locally, it doesn't solve it completely, because The parties who are refining locally still have to incur costs. They get crude at the market value. So unless the government decides that it will supply the crude oil for local production at a price which is significantly below the international market price, that's the only thing that can solve it. But otherwise, you still have to deal with existing costs scenarios. And that's with regard to the refining of the petroleum.
So, I mean, I have about 2 questions now I'm thinking of, and that is the hope of the Dangote refinery coming to save the day in this case. And perhaps the next one is the other stakeholders who are saying removing fuel subsidies, a no-no today, like the NLC and the others. Well,
the Dangote refinery is going to be very useful. And within the context of the last answer I gave, the Dangote refinery will be useful if Dangote gets crude oil specially supplied to him at a rate which is significantly lower than the international market rate for the purpose of local supply of petroleum products. If that happens, then we may have low prices relative to what should be a commercial price. So that's one. With regards to the concerns of the NLC and Labour and all that, these are very valid concerns. And governments, having that in mind, needs to look at options in the line with what I've just said, or other options which could, in the circumstances, ameliorate. But it must be said that there's a third party, which is the parties who supply the petroleum products, the marketers. So these people are also in business, and they're not there to give them fuel for charity. So at the end of the day, all those interests have to be put, they come in play. And I think that it's important that as a country, we realize that we probably are not as rich as we think we are. We have a high population, but a significant number of that high population live below the poverty line. And that's why we are feeling the heat of these price increases, which within the global context are not significant in the scheme of things.
We appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Dr. Emeka Akabogu is an energy expert. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.